The piercing sound of medical equipment beeping filled the hospital hallways as a dedicated mother rushed through her final rounds of the night shift. As a registered nurse for over 8 years, she had mastered the art of staying alert during these long hours. Her son was always on her mind, even as she checked on her patients, making sure they were comfortable for the night. Life hadn't been easy since her husband's passing 3 years ago. Being a single mom working night shifts meant relying on babysitters to watch her precious 6-year-old boy while she provided for their small family. The thought of her son waiting at home brought a warm smile to her face, despite her exhaustion. At first, everything seemed perfect with the new babysitter who started 3 months ago. She had found her through a well-known agency, and the sitter's references painted a picture of someone responsible and caring. The babysitter was in her late 20s, had 5 years of childcare experience, and lived just 10 minutes away. Everything looked good on paper. But mothers know their children better than anyone else. Small changes started appearing in her usually cheerful boy's behavior. The shift was so subtle that she almost missed it at first. Her son, who once bounced off the walls with energy and couldn't stop talking about his day of school, became quieter. His bright eyes began losing their spark. It started with little things. He stopped sharing stories about what games they played while she was at work. Then came the resistance to bedtime stories, something he had always loved. The most concerning change was how he would become unusually quiet whenever she mentioned the babysitter's next visit. One particular evening, while sorting through his backpack, she found his favorite action figure stuffed at the bottom, broken. When she asked him about it, he simply shrugged and walked away. This wasn't like him at all. He used to cry even if his toys got the smallest scratch. During family dinner at his grandmother's house, he barely touched his favorite mac and cheese. His grandmother noticed too, asking if everything was okay at home. He's probably just going through a phase, they said, but deep in her heart, this mother knew something wasn't right. She started paying more attention to his drawings. The once colorful pictures filled with smiling faces and sunny skies had become darker, using mostly black and gray crayons. His teacher mentioned during a parent-teacher conference that he had become more withdrawn during class activities. Sleep became a struggle too. He started having nightmares, something that hadn't happened since he was much younger. Some nights, she would find him curled up in a corner of his room instead of his bed, clutching his worn-out teddy bear tightly. The mom tried talking to him more often, creating special moments together during breakfast before school. She would make his favorite chocolate chip pancakes, hoping to see that bright smile again. Sometimes it worked, and for a brief moment, she would catch glimpses of her happy little boy. But as soon as the babysitter's name was mentioned, his shoulders would tense, and he would become very interested in pushing his food around the plate. She started keeping a journal, documenting these changes. Her nursing background had taught her the importance of noting patterns. Each entry made her more certain that something was wrong, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The babysitter's references were perfect, her background check was clean, and other parents had nothing but praise for her. Still, a mother's instinct is rarely wrong. She considered installing nanny cams but worried about the legal implications. She thought about switching babysitters but didn't want to act on mere suspicions. After all, good childcare was hard to find, especially for night shifts. The breaking point was approaching, though neither of them knew it yet. As she drove home from her shift that fateful Tuesday morning, she made a silent promise to herself she would get to the bottom of whatever was troubling her precious boy, no matter what it took. What happened next would shake their small family to its core, but it would also show just how strong a mother's love can be when protecting her child. Sometimes the hardest part isn't recognizing that something is wrong. It's gathering the courage to act on that knowledge. The dedicated mom spent countless hours researching the babysitting agency's background before hiring anyone. She checked everything, from online reviews to calling their office multiple times. The agency had assured her they thoroughly screened all their sitters, conducting background checks and verifying references. Their chosen babysitter had seemed perfect during the initial meeting. She arrived early, dressed professionally, and brought a portfolio of her childcare experience. Her warm smile and gentle way of speaking made the mom feel at ease. The babysitter shared stories about her previous work with children, showing pictures of art projects and describing educational activities she liked to do. "I believe in creating a nurturing environment," the babysitter had said, while the little boy peeked shyly from behind his mom's legs. Every child deserves to feel safe and happy. Those words had sealed the deal. They seemed to express exactly what this caring mother wanted for her son. The first few weeks went smoothly. The babysitter would send regular text updates with photos of art projects they'd done together or books they'd read. She always had dinner ready before leaving and made sure the boy finished his homework. The house was kept tidy, and she even helped with some light cleaning. But then subtle changes began creeping in. The photo updates became less frequent. When the mom would come home from her night shift, she started noticing small things out of place. Her son's favorite stuffed animals missing from his bed, toys scattered in unusual places, drawings crumpled in the trash. One morning, she found her son's beloved space-themed nightlight unplugged and shoved behind his dresser. When she asked about it, he mumbled something about being too old for baby lights and quickly changed the subject. This wasn't like him. He'd always been proud of that nightlight, often telling anyone who'd listen how it showed all the constellations on his ceiling. The mom started paying closer attention to the babysitter's behavior too. She noticed how the woman's friendly demeanor would shift slightly when she thought no one was watching. There were moments when the mom caught glimpses of impatience or irritation quickly masked by a practiced smile. During handovers, the babysitter's stories about their time together became vague and repetitive. We just played the usual games," she'd say, or everything was fine, as always. Gone were the detailed accounts of their activities that she'd shared in the beginning. The mom began varying her arrival times, sometimes coming home a little earlier than expected. Each time, she noticed how the babysitter seemed startled by her presence, quickly gathering her things as if eager to leave. The woman's cheerful facade appeared more forced during these surprise returns. Other parents from the neighborhood had nothing but praise for the babysitter. "She's wonderful with children," they'd said at school pickup. "You're so lucky to have found her." These comments made the mom question her growing concerns. Was she being overprotective? Was her worry about her son making her see problems that weren't really there? But her son's behavior told a different story. The usually energetic boy now spent hours in his room alone. He stopped asking to have friends over after school, something he used to love. When neighbor kids would knock on their door asking if he could play, he'd make excuses about having homework or feeling tired. The mom started keeping a detailed diary of all these changes. Her nursing background had taught her the importance of documentation. She noted dates, times, and specific incidents that seemed off. Small things on their own, perhaps, but together they painted a troubling picture. She considered installing security cameras, but worried about legal implications and whether it might make her son feel uncomfortable in his own home. Instead, she tried talking to him more, creating special moments together during their morning routine before school. During these quiet breakfast times, she would gently ask about his evenings with the babysitter. His responses became increasingly concerning. He'd stare at his cereal bowl, pushing the food around without eating. Sometimes he changed the subject entirely, asking about her work or what they were going to do on the weekend. The mom started reaching out to other parents whose children had been cared for by this babysitter in the past. Most gave glowing reviews, but one mother hesitated before saying, "Well, my daughter didn't really click with her, so we found someone else." Something about the way she said it made the mom's instincts tingle. Sleep became increasingly difficult for both mother and son. She'd lie awake during the day, wondering if she was doing enough to protect her child. He'd have trouble falling asleep at night, often asking to leave his bedroom door open and the hallway light on. The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on her shoulders. Every night as she left for work, watching her son's face fall as the babysitter arrived, she felt torn between her responsibility to provide for her family and her deepening concern for her child's well-being. Little did she know that the next evening would bring everything to a head, forcing her to confront her worst fears and take action that would change their lives forever. Sometimes the hardest decisions become the easiest when a child's safety is at stake. That Tuesday evening started like any other. The mom kissed her son goodbye, heading off to her night shift at the hospital, while trying to ignore the familiar knot in her stomach as the babysitter arrived. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but she had bills to pay and mouths to feed. The night shift at the hospital was particularly busy. Between caring for patients and handling emergency cases, she couldn't help but check her phone more frequently than usual. The babysitter had stopped sending her regular updates weeks ago, and now the silence felt deafening. Around midnight, while checking on an elderly patient, she found herself staring at a family photo on the patient's bedside table. It showed 3 generations smiling together, reminding her of her own little family. Her son's recent withdrawn behavior flashed through her mind, and she made a mental note to schedule a day off soon so they could spend more quality time together. The shift seemed to drag on endlessly. Each time she looked at the clock, only minutes had passed. Finally, as dawn approached, she hurried through her final rounds, eager to get home to her boy. The morning sky was just beginning to lighten as she pulled into their driveway. The babysitter left quickly, as usual, barely making eye contact while gathering her things. The mom found her son still asleep in his bed, but something was different. His blankets were twisted around him, and his favorite stuffed penguin lay forgotten on the floor, something he never did. Later that morning, as she was helping him get ready for his bath, she noticed he was unusually quiet. His small hands trembled as she helped him with his buttons. The bathroom had always been their safe space, where they would talk about their day while she helped him wash his hair. As she poured the warm water and added his favorite bubble bath, she noticed him standing in the corner, hugging himself tightly. His lower lip quivered and tears began rolling down his cheeks. Her heart stopped when he finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Mummy," he said, his words coming out between soft sobs. The babysitter did it again. Time seemed to freeze. The running water faded into background noise as she knelt down to her son's level. With gentle hands, she held his small shoulders, looking into his tear-filled eyes. "Baby, can you tell Mommy what happened?" What followed was the kind of conversation no parent should ever have to have with their child. Through hiccups and tears, he revealed the inappropriate touching, the threats to keep quiet, the reasons he'd been so afraid. He spoke of being told that nobody would believe him, that his mom would be angry if he said anything. The mom's hands shook as she reached for her phone, but her voice remained steady and calm for her son's sake. Years of handling medical emergencies had taught her how to keep her composure even when her heart was breaking. She knew exactly what she needed to do. With one arm around her trembling child, she dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice came through clear and professional. 911, what's your emergency? Without hesitation, she reported what her son had just told her. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking careful questions while assuring her that help was already on the way. She could hear the sound of computer keys clicking as the dispatcher entered information and coordinated with police units. Throughout the call, she kept her son close, whispering words of love and reassurance. "You're so brave for telling me," she said, running her fingers through his hair. "Mommy's here now, and nobody is going to hurt you anymore." The dispatcher guided her through the next steps, not to bathe him yet, to preserve any evidence. To write down everything he had told her while it was fresh in his memory. To reassure him that he was safe and that he had done the right thing by speaking up. Within minutes, she heard sirens in the distance, growing louder as they approached their street. Red and blue lights began dancing across their living room walls. Her son gripped her tighter, and she could feel his small heart racing. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, rocking him gently. "These are good people coming to help us. You're safe now. Mommy's got you, and I'm not going anywhere." She knew their lives would change forever after this morning. There would be questions to answer, statements to give, probably court dates to attend. But in that moment, holding her precious child, she felt nothing but fierce determination to protect him and get justice for what had happened. As she heard car doors slamming outside and footsteps approaching their front door, she took a deep breath. The hard part wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But they would face it together, mother and son, stronger than any force that tried to harm them. The knocking came at the door, firm but not frightening. It was the sound of help arriving, of justice beginning its course, of a new chapter starting in their lives. A chapter that, though difficult, would lead them toward healing and hope. The sound of knocking at the front door echoed through their small home. The mom took a deep breath, gathering her strength. Still holding her son close, she walked to answer it, her nurse's training helping her maintain composure despite her racing heart. 2 police officers stood on their doorstep. A tall woman with kind eyes and her male partner who carried a tablet. Behind them, a car marked Child Services pulled up to the curb. The female officer introduced herself gently, kneeling down to be at eye level with the boy, who was partially hidden behind his mother. "Hi there," she said softly. "We're here to help you and your mom. Would it be okay if we came inside to talk?" Her voice was warm and reassuring, helping to ease some of the tension in the room. The boy looked up at his mom, who nodded encouragingly. They settled in the living room, where family photos lined the walls, happy moments frozen in time that felt so distant now. The male officer stayed near the door, taking notes, while his partner sat on the couch across from the mother and son. A social worker joined them, carrying a briefcase and a stuffed teddy bear. The mom held her son's hand as she recounted their morning's conversation, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. She shared her documented concerns from the past months, the behavioral changes, the nightmares, the withdrawal from activities he once loved. The female officer listened intently, occasionally asking gentle questions. The social worker offered the teddy bear to the boy, explaining that it was a special bear for brave children. His small hands reached out hesitantly, pulling the soft toy close to his chest. "You're doing great," the officer assured them both. "I know this is really hard, but you're helping us make sure this doesn't happen to any other children." She explained that they would need to take the boy to a special doctor who was trained to talk to kids about these situations. The mom's nursing background helped her understand the importance of the medical examination, but her heart ached at what her son would have to go through. The social worker explained each step carefully, making sure both mother and child knew what to expect. While they talked, other officers arrived at the house. They took photos of the boy's room, collected his bedding, and gathered other potential evidence. The mom watched as they worked, feeling both relieved that action was being taken and overwhelmed by the reality of their situation. The dispatcher who had taken her 911 call had already sent officers to the babysitter's address. The female officer explained that they would handle that part. The mom's only job right now was to focus on her son. They would need formal statements later, but the immediate priority was getting the boy proper medical care and support. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, the mom quickly packed a small bag with her son's favorite pajamas and a few comfort items. The social worker explained that they had a special children's advocacy center where trained professionals would talk to him in a way that wouldn't be scary or overwhelming. The female officer offered to drive them in her patrol car. The boy's eyes widened at this suggestion. Despite everything, the idea of riding in a police car held a certain excitement for him. It was a small moment of childhood innocence in the midst of such a difficult situation. During the drive, the mom sent a quick text to her supervisor at the hospital, explaining that she needed emergency family leave. The response was immediate and supportive. "Take all the time you need. We're here for you both." The Children's Advocacy Center was nothing like a typical hospital. The walls were painted with cheerful murals, and the waiting room was filled with toys and books. A child psychologist introduced herself, wearing a bright sweater with cartoon characters that made the boy smile slightly. The mom watched as her son slowly began to trust these gentle professionals. They explained everything in terms he could understand, never rushing or pushing him. When it was time for him to talk with the psychologist alone, he looked back at his mom uncertainly. "I'll be right outside that door," she promised, squeezing his hand. "You can see me through the window the whole time, and I'm not going anywhere." The psychologist added that he could take his new teddy bear with him, and they could stop anytime he wanted. While her son was being interviewed, the mom spoke with a victim advocate who explained the next steps in the legal process. They discussed restraining orders, victim services, and counseling options. The advocate handed her a folder full of resources and emergency contact numbers. Throughout the long day, various professionals came and went: detectives, medical staff, counselors. Each one treated them with compassion and respect, understanding the delicate nature of the situation. They explained that other families had already come forward with similar stories about the babysitter. The mom's phone buzzed constantly with messages from family and close friends. The news had begun to spread, and their support system was rallying around them. Her sister offered to take time off work to help, and her mother was already on her way with homemade comfort food. As evening approached, they were finally cleared to go home. The boy was exhausted but had shown incredible bravery throughout the day. The female officer who had first responded gave him a junior police badge sticker, telling him he was one of the bravest kids she'd ever met. Before they left, the advocate provided them with information about the next steps: appointments with counselors, future interviews with prosecutors, and court dates. It was overwhelming, but the mom knew they wouldn't have to face any of it alone. The drive home was quiet, her son finally sleeping in his car seat, clutching his new teddy bear. The mom's mind raced with everything they would need to do: finding a new job with day shifts, arranging counseling sessions, helping her son feel safe again in their home. But for now, she focused on the present moment. They had taken the first crucial step. Her son had found the courage to speak up, and she had immediately believed and protected him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger for having taken action when it mattered most. The investigation moved quickly after that first day. The lead detective, a woman with 15 years of experience working with children, took personal charge of the case. She had kind eyes and always wore colorful scarves that made the little boy feel more comfortable during their talks. Early morning light filtered through the detective's office window as she gently interviewed the mom again. The detective's desk held family photos and children's drawings, little touches that made the space feel less intimidating. As they talked, she took detailed notes while explaining each step of the investigation process. "We've been looking into the babysitter's background more deeply," the detective explained, her voice steady and reassuring. "Sometimes people can slip through initial background checks, but we're digging much deeper now." She showed the mom a thick folder of gathered evidence, careful not to share specific details about other cases but confirming they weren't alone. The mom's hands trembled slightly as she sipped her coffee. She couldn't help but think about all the signs she'd noticed but hadn't acted on soon enough. The detective seemed to read her mind. "You did exactly what you should have done," she assured her. "You noticed changes in your son, you documented them, and most importantly, you believed him immediately when he told you." Back at home, their daily routine had changed completely. The mom had taken extended leave from her nursing job, her supervisors being incredibly understanding about the situation. Her hospital colleagues had even started a meal train, making sure they had home-cooked food every evening. Their living room became a safe haven for healing. They spent hours there together, building pillow forts and reading stories. The boy's new counselor had suggested maintaining as much normalcy as possible while creating new, positive memories in their home. Every day, they would write down one good thing that happened, no matter how small. The investigation revealed troubling patterns. The babysitting agency had missed several red flags in their screening process. The detective discovered that the babysitter had changed addresses frequently, moving between different cities every few months. Each time, she had managed to stay just ahead of complaints being filed. Other families began coming forward with similar stories. The detective's office received dozens of calls after the initial report made the local news. Each new revelation strengthened their case, but also weighed heavily on the mom's heart, knowing other children had been hurt too. The child psychologist working with them explained how important it was to let the boy process everything at his own pace. Some days, he wanted to talk about what happened. Other days, he just wanted to play with his toys and pretend everything was normal. Both reactions were perfectly okay, she assured them. Support came from unexpected places. The mom's elderly neighbor, who had always seemed distant, started bringing over fresh-baked cookies every Wednesday. The boy's school teacher set up a special reading corner in the classroom where he could go whenever he felt overwhelmed. His classmates made him cards with drawings of superheroes, calling him brave. The investigation team worked tirelessly, piecing together evidence from multiple sources. They collected security footage from nearby businesses, interviewed other families who had employed the babysitter, and carefully built a timeline of events. The detective made sure to keep the mom updated without overwhelming her with distressing details. One morning, while getting ready for another meeting with the investigators, the boy did something that brought tears to his mom's eyes. He smiled at his reflection in the mirror. It was a small thing, but it had been weeks since she'd seen that genuine expression of joy on his face. The counseling sessions were slowly helping him rebuild his confidence. The prosecution team assigned to their case was experienced in handling sensitive cases involving children. They met with the mom in a comfortable conference room, explaining how they would proceed with charges. They emphasized that the boy wouldn't have to testify in open court. They could use recorded interviews and other evidence instead. Technology played a crucial role in building their case. Digital forensics experts examined the babysitter's phone records, social media accounts, and online activity. They discovered a pattern of suspicious behavior that stretched back further than anyone had initially suspected. The mom started attending a support group for parents whose children had experienced similar trauma. In those evening meetings, she found people who truly understood what she was going through. They shared stories, advice, and sometimes just sat together in understanding silence. As weeks passed, the investigation gathered momentum. The detectives' board filled with connections and evidence, all carefully documented and organized. The babysitter's previous employers were interviewed, and background checks were run in multiple states, revealing a history that had been carefully hidden. Through it all, the boy showed remarkable resilience. His counselor noted how he was slowly opening up more, using art therapy to express his feelings when words felt too difficult. His drawings began to include more colors again, moving away from the dark shades he used in recent months. The mom found strength she didn't know she had. Between meetings with investigators, counseling sessions, and caring for her son, she also started advocating for changes in childcare worker screening processes. Her nursing background helped her speak knowledgeably about trauma and healing. Each new piece of evidence brought them closer to justice, but the detective reminded them that healing was just as important as the legal process. She made sure they had access to every available resource, from victim advocacy services to emergency counseling hotlines that they could call any time of day or night. Looking back at her detailed diary of observations, the mom realized how valuable her documentation had become to the investigation. Those small notes about behavioral changes and odd incidents now helped paint a clear picture of what had happened. The detective praised her attention to detail, saying it would make a significant difference in their case. As this phase of their journey continued, mother and son grew stronger together. They were no longer just victims of a crime, they were survivors helping to prevent the same thing from happening to other families. Their story was becoming one of hope, resilience, and the power of speaking up. The morning of the arrest was cloudy and cool. The mom had just finished making breakfast when her phone buzzed with a message from the lead detective. "We've got her," the text read. "She's in custody." The mom's hands shook as she set down her coffee cup, relief and anxiety washing over her in equal measure. Word spread quickly through their small community. News vans parked along their street, but neighbors formed a protective barrier, politely turning away reporters who tried to approach their house. The elderly lady next door even put up a "no trespassing" sign, standing guard on her porch with her arms crossed. The district attorney's office moved swiftly. They had built a strong case, supported by evidence from multiple families. The prosecutor, a parent herself, met with them in her office, its walls covered with children's artwork from previous cases, each picture representing a child who had found justice. "Your son won't have to face her in court," the prosecutor explained, her voice gentle but firm. "We have more than enough evidence without putting him through that." She spread out papers on her desk, showing how they had tracked the babysitter's pattern of behavior across 3 different states. The boy's counseling sessions continued, now focused on building strength and moving forward. His therapist used play therapy, helping him process his feelings through art and storytelling. Slowly, his nightmares became less frequent. He started sleeping in his own bed again, his new teddy bear standing guard against bad dreams. Community support poured in from unexpected places. The local martial arts studio offered free self-defense classes for children. The public library started a reading program about personal safety, using age-appropriate books to teach children about boundaries. The boys' school implemented new security measures for after-school programs. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday morning. The moms sat in the courthouse hallway, surrounded by other families who had come forward. They held hands and shared quiet words of encouragement. Some had driven from other states to be there, each with their own story of betrayed trust and delayed justice. Evidence mounted as investigators dug deeper. The babysitter's phone revealed concerning internet searches. Her bank records showed suspicious patterns of cash deposits. Former employers came forward with stories they had dismissed at the time, but now recognized as warning signs. The prosecution team worked tirelessly, building an airtight case. They gathered security camera footage, phone records, and witness statements. The babysitter's attempt to hide her past unraveled as investigators uncovered a trail of complaints that had never made it into official records. At home, healing continued day by day. The boy started showing interest in his old hobbies again. He asked to join the soccer team, something he quit months ago. His mom watched from the sidelines of his first practice, tears in her eyes as she saw him laugh with his teammates. The district attorney's office kept them updated on every development. They learned that the babysitter had accepted a plea deal, sparing everyone the stress of a trial. The prosecutor explained that the evidence was so overwhelming, defense attorneys had advised against going to court. Support groups became a lifeline for both mother and son. The mom found strength in connecting with other parents who understood her journey. The boy joined a children's group where he could play with kids who had similar experiences, all under the guidance of trained counselors. Local lawmakers took notice of their case. A state representative visited their home, sitting at their kitchen table to discuss ways to strengthen background check requirements for child care workers. The mom shared her detailed notes about how the babysitter had slipped through the cracks in the system. The boy's school principal organized a parent education night about child safety. The mom was invited to speak, sharing their story in hopes of helping other families recognize warning signs. Her nursing background helped her explain the importance of trusting parental instincts and taking action. Media attention grew as the case progressed, but the detective helped them maintain their privacy. She handled press inquiries herself, protecting the families while ensuring the public understood the importance of thorough child care worker screening. Their story inspired changes in local child care regulations. The city council began working on new requirements for background checks, including mandatory reporting of all complaints, even those that didn't result in formal charges. The mom testified at council meetings, her voice steady as she advocated for stronger protections. The day of sentencing approached with mixed emotions. The mom felt relief that justice would be served, but also anxiety about closing this chapter of their lives. Her son asked questions about what would happen next, showing wisdom beyond his years as they discussed forgiveness and moving forward. Other families reached out through their victim advocate, sharing their own stories of healing and recovery. Each message reinforced that they weren't alone, that their brave decision to speak up had created ripples of change throughout the community. The prosecution team prepared them for the sentencing hearing, explaining what to expect. They wouldn't need to attend, but the mom chose to write a victim impact statement. Late into the night, she poured her heart into those pages, describing how one person's actions had affected so many lives. As this phase of their journey neared its end, they found themselves surrounded by a network of support they never knew existed. Their story had become part of a larger movement for change, proving that even the darkest experiences could lead to positive transformation. 1 year had passed since that life-changing morning when a brave little boy spoke up and his mother made that crucial 911 call. So much had changed, yet their bond had only grown stronger through all the challenges they'd faced together. The mom stood at her kitchen window, sipping her morning coffee, watching her son play in the backyard with his friends. His laughter floated through the air, a sound that had once seemed lost but now filled their home again. He was building a fortress with his friends, complete with a lookout tower made from cardboard boxes. She thought back to the day of the sentencing, when justice was finally served. The babysitter had received a lengthy prison term, with no possibility of early release. But more importantly, the case had sparked a movement for change that spread far beyond their small community. Their story had inspired new legislation, now known locally as the Child Protection Act. The law required stricter background checks for child care workers, including mandatory fingerprinting and cross-state database searches. It also created a centralized reporting system for complaints, ensuring that warning signs couldn't be hidden by moving between cities or states. The mom had found her voice as an advocate for child safety. What started as speaking at local parent meetings grew into presenting at statewide conferences. She shared their story with other parents, teachers, and lawmakers, helping them understand the importance of believing children and taking action when something feels wrong. Her nursing schedule had changed too. She transferred to day shifts, allowing her to be home every evening with her son. Her hospital had been wonderfully supportive, even creating a new position for her in pediatric care, where she could use her experience to help other families going through trauma. The boy's healing journey continued with ups and downs. Some days were harder than others, but his resilience amazed everyone around him. His art therapy sessions had produced dozens of bright, hopeful paintings that now decorated their hallway. His counselor noted how the dark colors he once used had been replaced with vibrant blues, yellows, and greens. Their support group had become like a second family. Monthly meetings turned into friendship gatherings, where parents shared both challenges and victories. The children formed their own special bonds, understanding each other in ways others couldn't. They called themselves the Brave Hearts Club, complete with secret handshakes and silly jokes. The local community had transformed too. Their neighborhood watch program expanded to include childcare worker verification. The public library hosted regular workshops about child safety and emotional well-being. Even the ice cream shop owner kept a special board where kids could write down their hopes and dreams. Schools across the district adopted new training programs for teachers and staff about recognizing signs of abuse. The boys' school created a peer support system where older students helped younger ones feel safe and included. His former teacher had become a certified child safety educator, inspired by their story. The elderly neighbor who had stood guard against reporters still brought over cookies every Wednesday. She'd expanded her baking to include special treats for their support group meetings, saying that sweetness helps healing. Her chocolate chip cookies had become famous among the Brave Hearts Club kids. Their story reached state legislators, who invited the mom to consult on new childcare regulations. She spent hours reviewing proposed laws, offering suggestions based on their experience. Her kitchen table often disappeared under stacks of legal documents as she worked to ensure other families would be better protected. 1 year had passed since that life-changing morning when a brave little boy spoke up and his mother made that crucial 911 call. So much had changed, yet their bond had only grown stronger through all the challenges they'd faced together. The mom stood at her kitchen window, sipping her morning coffee, watching her son play in the backyard with his friends. His laughter floated through the air, a sound that had once seemed lost but now filled their home again. He was building a fortress with his friends, complete with a lookout tower made from cardboard boxes. She thought back to the day of the sentencing, when justice was finally served. The babysitter had received a lengthy prison term with no possibility of early release. But more importantly, the case had sparked a movement for change that spread far beyond their small community. Their story had inspired new legislation, now known locally as the Child Protection Act. The law required stricter background checks for childcare workers, including mandatory fingerprinting and cross-state database searches. It also created a centralized reporting system for complaints, ensuring that warning signs couldn't be hidden by moving between cities or states. The mom had found her voice as an advocate for child safety. What started as speaking at local parent meetings grew into presenting at statewide conferences. She shared their story with other parents, teachers, and lawmakers, helping them understand the importance of believing children and taking action when something feels wrong. Her nursing schedule had changed too. She transferred to day shifts, allowing her to be home every evening with her son. Her hospital had been wonderfully supportive, even creating a new position for her in pediatric care, where she could use her experience to help other families going through trauma. The boy's healing journey continued with ups and downs. Some days were harder than others, but his resilience amazed everyone around him. His art therapy sessions had produced dozens of bright, hopeful paintings that now decorated their hallway. His counselor noted how the dark colors he once used had been replaced with vibrant blues, yellows, and greens. Their support group had become like a second family. Monthly meetings turned into friendship gatherings where parents shared both challenges and victories. The children formed their own special bonds, understanding each other in ways others couldn't. They called themselves the Brave Hearts Club, complete with secret handshakes and silly jokes. The local community had transformed too. The Neighborhood Watch program expanded to include childcare worker verification. The public library hosted regular workshops about child safety and emotional well-being. Even the ice cream shop owner kept a special board where kids could write down their hopes and dreams. Schools across the district adopted new training programs for teachers and staff about recognizing signs of abuse. The boys' school created a peer support system where older students helped younger ones feel safe and included. His former teacher had become a certified child safety educator, inspired by their story. The elderly neighbor who had stood guard against reporters still brought over cookies every Wednesday. She'd expanded her baking to include special treats for their support group meetings, saying that sweetness helps healing. Her chocolate chip cookies had become famous among the Brave Hearts Club kids. Their story reached state legislators, who invited the mom to consult on new childcare regulations. She spent hours reviewing proposed laws, offering suggestions based on their experience. Her kitchen table often disappeared under stacks of legal documents as she worked to ensure other families would be better protected. The detective who had handled their case stayed in touch, occasionally stopping by to share updates about how their case had helped solve others. She had started training other officers in handling sensitive cases involving children, using their story as an example of how believing and supporting victims leads to justice. The boy had discovered a talent for writing during his therapy sessions. He started creating stories about a superhero who helped other kids feel brave. His counselor helped him turn these stories into small books that they shared with other children in therapy. His simple words touched hearts and helped others find their voice. Their home felt different now, not because of what had happened there, but because of how they had reclaimed it. Every room held memories of healing, family movie nights in the living room, cooking lessons in the kitchen, bedtime stories that turned into long talks about feelings and dreams. The mom had started a blog sharing resources for other parents, carefully protecting their privacy while offering hope and practical advice. Her posts about trusting parental instincts and the importance of documentation reached families across the country. Comments poured in from others who found strength in their story. Local news featured positive stories about their advocacy work, focusing on the changes they'd helped create. The boy sometimes joined his mom for interviews, proud to show other kids that speaking up makes a difference. His courage inspired a children's book series about personal safety, written in collaboration with child psychologists. Their journey had transformed from a story of trauma into one of triumph and positive change. The mom often reflected on how their worst experience had led to their greatest purpose, helping other families stay safe and find healing. One evening, as they sat on their porch swing watching the sunset, the boy looked up at his mom. "We helped make things better, didn't we?" he asked softly. She hugged him close, tears in her eyes as she nodded. They had done more than just survive. They had created lasting change that would protect countless other children. The future held new challenges and opportunities, but they faced them together, stronger for what they'd overcome. Their story continued to inspire others, proving that even the darkest moments could lead to light, and that one brave voice could start a symphony of change.